72% of Britons, let me check my notes, would support making misogyny a hate crime. And the reason I had to hesitate there is because apparently 72% of Britons think an awful lot of things.
It's a magic number, isn't it? For the government in particular. It seems to be 72% of people support the government's agenda in general a lot of the time.
I know.
It's strange, isn't it?
It's staggering. There'll be some sort of policy proposal that's just bubbling away in the wings. Then all of a sudden, YouGov comes out saying 72% of people think that the government policy is correct. It's sort of miraculous, really. Like
it's really great that we've got a government that just represents our interests so well.
It just knows what we want before we even know ourselves.
It's amazing.
But the thing which surprises me all of this the time is that most of the time, what 72% of people want is not what I want. It's not what my friends want. It's not what my family wants. In fact, virtually no one I know wants the thing that 72% of people want. Now, sure, that's a small sample size compared to the British population, but you would think there would be a little bit more overlap, wouldn't you?
I would say so. If you're getting 72% and you get a sample of all the people you know in your life, that's enough to really doubt the validity of 72%, because that's what, three quarters of people.
Yeah, that's almost a lot of people. That's most people. That means you're in the minority. And people don't like being in the minority, generally speaking.
Yeah, we certainly
people
know
like
that.
to conform. But they continue. MPs voted yesterday to reject a proposal that would make misogyny a hate crime.
At least they rejected it, I suppose.
Indeed.
That's
a
a small
benefit.
Yeah.
I wonder why they rejected it, because I bet it wasn't on those grounds. The amendment to the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill was proposed by the House of Lords and defeated in the Commons by 314 to 190 votes, prompting criticism from campaigners who say that misogyny is the root cause of violence against women.
Really?
How many times have we heard that canard? The men bad school of domestic violence. It's just violence against men, by other men, by women. That happens all the time as well. But we don't care about that. It's violence against women has this deep-seated psychological and systemic reason behind it, which exists seemingly only in the mind of university academics.
I would say so.
Funny that. There is no specific hate crime law in England and Wales, but judges have enhanced sentencing powers when crimes like harassment and assault can be proven to be motivated by the victim's race, religion, sexual orientation, disability, or transgender identity. Now, they use the word proven here, and proven is a very strong word. Proof implies a very strong, in fact, the highest level of evidentiary foundation for a claim that you can imagine.
Categorically true.
And generally what we see is there is no proof at all. They simply look at the victim. The victim fits into one of these protected categories. And then it seems from that point on, the proof that it was not racist is the onus is on the defendant, which is the opposite of the presumption of innocence. There's a presumption of hate crime upon which you have to defend against.
So it means that if someone belongs to those protected characteristics, if you commit a crime against them, you're basically going to be sentenced for longer, and therefore the law favours them more than other people. Yeah,
they're a protected class in that if a crime is committed against them, the criminal faces higher punishment, whereas those who are not included by protected characteristics are an easy target.
It's the definition of illiberalism, isn't it?
Yeah, this is creating a segregated society, like a multiple-tier society. It's why people really don't like it, and I don't think that 72% of people are in favour of this system.
No, it's ridiculous.
YouGov polling reveals that 7 in 10 Britons, 72%, support longer sentences for crimes motivated by hostility or prejudice based on sex and gender, which would have the effect of making misogyny a hate crime and would likewise also protect men from discrimination based on their sex or gender. Do you think that would work in practice?
No, of course not.
No, absolutely not. There is no one out there in men's corner, basically. This includes 4 in 10 or 40% who would strongly support the move.
4 in 10. So 40% of the country strongly support making misogyny a hate crime.
Yeah.
I really doubt that. I imagine 4 in 10 people don't even know what misogyny is.
Yeah. I just remember all of the ridiculous stories we've heard over the last years of, oh, that's misogyny, from really minor things, microaggressions, so to speak,
Mhm.
like holding the door for a woman is misogyny, or paying for the bill at a date is misogyny, that sort of thing.
Well, I can stand by those. They can open their own doors and pay their own bills, then fine by me.
Right, indeed. Now, of course, those things wouldn't be directly criminalized because, as they said, hate crime is an aggravating factor. So there we go. But then there's another one. Oh, look at this. 72% of English people, let me see, back Prime Minister's plan to return to lockdown. And this was a while ago. 3 in 10 still don't think the measures go far enough. Wow. And look at that. 72% support returning the country to lockdown, and 42% say they strongly support doing so. It's the same as last time. 70% yes, 40% big yes. It's almost as if they've engineered the numbers they want in the poll to try and have the most persuasive impact on the readers.
It's not like you can engineer a questionnaire to get the results that you want. That's never happened. I mean, that's not a...
It's not like you can engineer your sample size. You can ask the right people. So, for example, the misogyny one, if suppose they were to ask a random sample of people, you wouldn't get 72%, we don't care about that. What if you asked a random sample of people who are studying gender studies at university? I think you might get a lot closer to the mark there.
Yeah, of course, there are lots of different ways that they can do this. And if only I'd specialised in research methodology, I mean, that would be very convenient. I don't know why I'm being sarcastic about that. Yes, I have. So yeah, you can manipulate the sample for one. One of the ways you can do it is manipulate the analysis, or you can keep on running the tests until you get a result you want.
Yeah, and that's something that they do. So if you look at these studies, what they'll do is they'll issue surveys on lots and lots of things. So they study dozens of things, and then they'll basically filter through them until they get one that has a nice percentage that they like. And then they'll use that one as representative.
And in academia, by the way, this is enough to put a black mark against your name forever, as in you will never publish any more research again if you're caught to be doing this. And there are many academics who have done so and basically lost their ability to publish research, lost their ability to be a professor, basically are exiled from doing any research. However, there is not this peer-reviewed sort of ecosystem around the YouGov polling. Basically, it's its own thing, and people don't really look at the methodology of how they've done so.
Right.
And I'd be very surprised if they published it in great detail and in full to the style in which you would expect in other areas and in say, the private sector.
Yep, absolutely.
And I think because it's attached to the government, in a way. I believe it was set up by someone who is...
It was set up, funnily you mention it, by Nadeem Zahawi, who is now a Conservative MP.
He was a member of the cabinet as well, wasn't he? And he might still be, for that matter. I've lost
Secretary
track.
of State for Education.
Oh, well, that's a little bit ironic, isn't it? Maybe he'll start teaching people how to do proper statistics and gathering data.
Thing. I don't think
ethically.
YouGov has ever been about proper statistics or ethical gathering of data. I think it has purely been about messaging. It's the polls which create public opinion because they launch these polls and then they get reported all through the corporate media. I mean, you may well presume that he has a reasonable amount of connections within corporate media as well, but they just pick them up and run with them, and that gives them a lot of legitimacy for doing what they're doing. In fact, that process is a replacement for the electorate in a way. Because no longer do you gather opinion from people by going to MP surgeries and speaking to normal British people and collecting their concerns and discussing them in a public forum like Parliament and writing it down and making decisions. No, you just push out one of these polls and you say, oh yes, we surveyed so-and-so many people and we know that the people want this. And we don't even know that they're actually collecting the polls even.
Yeah, it's a
I'm
way
sure
of...
they are, but...
It's a way of cutting out the British people from the decision-making process.
Yes.
It's basically cutting them out of democracy.
Right. Yeah, cutting the people out of democracy. That's what this kind of polling does. That's a very good way of putting it. But what else do 7 in 10 people, 72% of British people believe? Let's go to the next one. 72% think the Daily Mail was wrong to say Ralph Miliband hated Britain. Oh dear.
That's going a bit back, isn't it?
I mean, it is from a while ago. It's 8 years ago. But he literally said he hated Britain. I believe he literally said it. Like there's a quote in his diary saying, "I hate Britain," or words to that effect. And the Daily Mail just compiled his works, and he was Ralph Miliband, father of David Miliband and Ed Miliband, former Labour opposition leaders. He was a communist, I believe, and he was very sort of. I don't know if he was Trotskyite or Stalinist, but he was very anti-British.
I mean, colour me surprised. A communist that hates the country they live in.
And it's especially ironic because I remember this all coming out at the time. He was actually evacuated from Europe to Britain during the Second World War because he was Jewish. And then he harboured a simmering resentment of the family that hosted him in Britain, presumably. And I think he wrote about them quite poorly. And then decided that this country should be destroyed and replaced with a communist utopia in so many words.
I mean,
but he didn't hate
case.
Britain. 72% of Britons think.
Best case against asylum I've ever seen. That's too horrible, I think. But still.
Then another thing. What is this? Oh, yes. 72% of Britons hate Extinction Rebellion. Oh, now, this one is actually lowballing it, I suspect, but here we go. The protesters have clashed with drivers and police, and the latest... Oh, this is in Slate Britain, sorry. And the latest YouGov polling shows that the public's patience and support is waning. 72% now oppose the group's actions, up 13 points compared to when the protests first began in mid-September. And remember, this was the lot who basically blocked all of the roads and wouldn't let people even get to hospital.
Yes,
they were driving to hospital.
They glued themselves to the road, didn't they? And
they said in response, well, we're sorry, but you have to think of the climate and put the climate first.
I'm pretty sure some woman was waiting to go to the hospital and she got permanent spine injuries or something like that.
Yeah,
because they were blocking the road. Yeah, and
the worst thing about this, I think, was that the police basically helped them do it because they formed a block in front of the cars and just talked to the protesters. And
I'm pretty sure they arrested people who removed them from the road as well.
Yeah.
Which under any other circumstance, they certainly wouldn't do that.
Right. And you can tell absolutely, though, that we have the sort of like the ideology of the state permeating through both the protesters and the police there. But apparently not as far as the government, because YouGov didn't like him, as we saw from the revelation of this poll. Then we have another one here, which is an old chestnut, Brexit. And this one, actually, I think might be accurate. It's another 72%er, but 72% of Britons in March 2019 thought that the EU had the upper hand in Brexit negotiations. Do you think the EU had the upper hand in Brexit negotiations?
They did when it was Theresa May, and I'm not too sure about Boris being too good either, to be honest.
No, I think by the time Boris was in, Theresa May had already signed away Northern Ireland with the so-called Irish backstop, another buzzword example. And Boris Johnson basically let that stay on the table just so that he could sign off a quick deal and move on. But this was Theresa May in charge at the time, wasn't it? 2019. Boris came in the end of 2020, am I right?
Lost track now.
No, I don't think I am right. I think this is Boris Johnson already. But that's very interesting that they're just pushing this messaging out at various points in the narrative to just impose what the public think on the public, or impose what the government thinks the public should think on the public. It's quite nefarious.
And one of the main problems with polling in general is that you never really know whether the sample you've got is representative of the people at large. And I imagine that if they're running these polls as frequently and as often, that's the same thing, as frequently as they claim to be and on lots of different topics, that they can't be taking these massive samples that you would need. So you think you're talking like thousands, if not tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people to know, okay, well, this might be representative of the will of 66 million people. And of course, you've also got the nature of, okay, well, we're sampling people online.
How many?
And it's people that are volunteering.
Right. And how many people of this group are actually British as well, you could ask. You know,
I imagine they've probably got some kind of criteria where you can't respond if you're outside of
potentially, but
British
it's
Isles.
something that you could hack. You could subvert that if you wanted.
Don't get me wrong.
There's also, I think, because I think there's also the fact that various people, you can sign up to YouGov, so I believe, and they will send you questions that you can answer, and then they'll take that and use it in their polls. But it seems like from the people I know who are signed up, they get sort of categorized into various different types of questions. Like they don't get asked the questions that they would have a contrarian view on.
Oh, really? That's
I've
interesting.
heard that, although obviously from a small sample size I can't confirm.
Mhm.
So there are many ways they have of manipulating and massaging the public will in this way.
Very disturbing.
Mm.
Right.
If you appreciated that segment from the podcast The Lotus Eaters, you can go to lotuseaters.com to get access to all the premium content we have on the site, such as this interview with Gavin Bobby by Bo, and this you may better know as Mosque Busters on the encroachment of Islam. So please do sign up to get access to that, because of course that one is premium. And if you want to follow us for more content, of course you can follow us on Getter at lotuseaters_com. Thank you and goodbye.